The envelope sat on the kitchen table, unopened, the way bad news always arrives in my house quietly, almost politely, as though it didn't want to disturb the tea I was brewing. Outside, the first real snow of November was falling over Kingston, dusting the maple tree my late husband had planted the year our son was born. I could hear the kettle starting to whistle, the old radiator clicking in the hallway, and somewhere upstairs, the creak of a floorboard that had been creaking for 42 years. I was 71 years old, a retired schoolteacher, a widow of 6 years, and a grandmother of 3. I had lived in this house longer than my son had been alive, and until that afternoon, I had believed, truly believed, that I knew what my family thought of me. I poured the tea into the blue mug my granddaughter Poppy had made in her grade 3 art class, the one with the lopsided handle and the smudged fingerprint glazed right into the side, and I sat down and picked up the envelope. It was from my bank, RBC, a statement I'd asked to keep receiving on paper because the online banking never quite made sense to me no matter how many times my son walked me through it. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I'd been watching the balance like a hawk for the past 8 months, ever since I'd started planning the trip. The trip. Lord, the trip. My husband Gerald had always wanted to take the whole family to Prince Edward Island. Not Cavendish, not the tourist strip with the Anne of Green Gables souvenirs, but the quiet eastern side, up near Souris where his grandmother had been born. He used to talk about it on Sunday evenings when the kids were little, spreading an old road map across the kitchen table and tracing the coastline with his thumb. He'd say, "Margaret, one day we'll rent a cottage out there, and I'll teach Daniel how to dig for clams, and we'll sit on that red sand and watch the sun come up over the Gulf." He never got to do it. A stroke took him on a Tuesday morning in March, 6 years ago, before the maple tree had even started to bud. So I decided I would do it for him, for all of us. I started saving the week after his funeral. Not because I was being morbid, but because I needed something to reach toward, some distant shore that wasn't grief. I took my teacher's pension, and my CPP, and my OAS, and every month I moved a bit into a high-interest savings account at the credit union. Not a jar, mind you. I'm not a child about money, and I watched it grow, slowly, patiently, the way Gerald had taught me to watch the garden grow. By the time I sat down to plan the trip in earnest, I had just over $18,000 set aside, enough for a 3-bedroom cottage on the water for 10 days in July, enough for flights from Toronto for my son Daniel, his wife Vanessa, and their 3 children, enough for a rental van, for lobster dinners, for the ferry, for ice cream in Charlottetown, for every small joy I could imagine pressing into the hands of the people I loved most in the world. I booked it in February. I remember because I was sitting right at this same kitchen table, wearing Gerald's old cardigan because the thermostat was acting up again, and I was so nervous clicking the confirm button on the cottage rental that my hand was actually shaking. I'd never spent that much money on anything in my life, not even the car. But when the confirmation email came through, and I saw the words, "Booking confirmed Red Sands Cottage, July 12, 22, I cried. I cried the way you cry when you've been holding something in for years and you finally let it out. I called Daniel that same evening. My son. My only child. 39 years old, an accountant at a firm in Mississauga, married for 12 years to a woman I had tried. I had genuinely, wholeheartedly tried to love like a daughter. When he picked up, I could hear the television in the background and one of the kids laughing, and I said, "Daniel, sweetheart, sit down. I have something wonderful to tell you." And I told him. I told him about PEI, about the cottage, about how I'd saved for it, about how this was going to be the trip Dad had always wanted. And Daniel, I could hear it in his voice. He got quiet in that way. He gets when he's moved, but doesn't know how to say it. He said, Mom, that's a lot. Are you sure? And I said, I've never been more sure of anything. He said he'd talk to his wife and call me back. That should have been my first warning. But when you've loved someone since the moment the nurse first placed them in your arms, you don't read warnings. You read hope into everything. Vanessa called me 2 days later. Not Daniel, Vanessa. She has a particular way of speaking on the phone, a kind of polished, careful enunciation she developed when she started climbing the ladder at the marketing firm where she works. She said, Margaret, Daniel told me about the PEI trip. That's really generous of you. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about what this looks like, logistically. I remember she used that exact word, logistically, and something in my stomach turned over, but I told myself I was being silly. I said, Of course, dear, whatever you need to know. And she asked about the cottage layout, about the bedrooms, about whether there was Wi-Fi for her work calls, about whether we could swap the dates to earlier in July, because her own mother was visiting from Vancouver Island the week I'd booked. I said I'd see what I could do. I didn't tell her the rebooking fee was $1,200. I just paid it. That was the first time I paid extra. It wasn't the last. Over the next 5 months, Vanessa found small adjustments to request, and each one cost me something. She wanted a different rental vehicle, a nicer one, with captain's chairs in the middle row because her youngest got carsick. That was $800 more. She wanted us to fly out of Toronto Pearson instead of Billy Bishop because the parking was easier for her sister who was dropping them off. That was $200 per ticket in change fees. She wanted me to book a specific restaurant in Charlottetown for one of the nights, a place called the Lobster Key, where the prix-fixe was $90 a head. I said yes to all of it. I said yes because every time I thought about saying no, I imagined Poppy, my middle grandchild, 8 years old, the one who still loved me without editing herself. I imagined her sitting on red sand next to me, putting her small hand in mine, and asking about her grandfather. That image was worth any amount of money. Daniel called me in late May, and I could tell he'd been coached. He said, Mom, Vanessa was thinking, since you're paying for everything, it might feel a bit awkward for her family if we all went together. Her parents and her sister were hoping to come for the back half of the trip. Would it be okay if we extended it by 4 days? Her parents, her sister's husband, 3 more adults. I did the math in my head and I heard myself saying yes before I'd even finished calculating it. Another $4,200, stretched across flights and food and a larger cottage upgrade, and I just said yes. Because he was my son, and he was asking, and because a mother who says no to her son feels, in the moment, like she's failing at the only job she ever really understood. By the end of June, I had spent just over $24,000. I had drained my savings account, my TFSA, and a portion of a GIC I had to break early and pay a penalty on. I didn't tell Daniel any of that. I just kept saying yes. And then, on the afternoon of July 2nd, 10 days before the trip, I came back from picking up groceries at the Metro, and I sat down at the kitchen table and I opened the bank statement. And on the last page, in the transaction history, I saw 2 charges I didn't recognize. 2 tickets, booked through Air Canada, to Charlottetown, departing July 12th. My name wasn't on them. Vanessa's sister's name was on them, and her husband's. Someone had used the travel account I'd set up, the one Daniel had helped me link to the credit card for easier booking, to buy 2 tickets for people I hadn't even agreed would be there for the first half of the teen trip. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the statement, holding that blue mug with Poppy's fingerprint on it. The tea had gone cold. The snow wait. No, I'm telling this wrong. It wasn't snowing in July. Forgive me. I'm telling you this from November. from after everything happened, and my memory keeps folding the seasons together. It was hot that day, record-breaking hot, the kind of July afternoon where the asphalt shimmers and the cicadas won't stop. I remember sweat beading on my upper lip as I read that statement, and I remember thinking, quite calmly, that something had gone very wrong, and I wasn't sure yet how wrong. I called Daniel. He didn't pick up. I called again an hour later. He didn't pick up. I sent a text. "Sweetheart, please call me when you get a chance. There's something on my bank statement I need to ask you about." And I waited. His reply came at 9:47 that evening. Not a call, a text. I can still see the exact wording on the screen, because I took a screenshot of it, and I have looked at that screenshot more times than I would like to admit. "Mom, we need to talk about the trip." Vanessa's been thinking a lot about family dynamics, and she feels it would be better for everyone if this was a her family-only trip on the PEI side. "You won't be joining us. It's not personal. She just prefers to keep it intimate with her parents and sister. I know this is hard, but I think it's the right call. We'll figure out a separate weekend with you later in the summer. Also, we used the travel account for her sister's tickets. Hope that's okay. I'll sort it out with you afterwards. Not personnel." I read it 4 times. Then I got up from the kitchen table and I went to the bathroom and I was sick. I hadn't been sick like that since Gerald's funeral. I came back to the kitchen and I sat down and I read it a 5th time, and I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. He didn't say he was sorry. Not once. He said it wasn't personal, as though the decision to uninvite a mother from the trip she had paid for was some kind of administrative matter, a scheduling conflict, a rounding error in somebody else's spreadsheet. Not personal, after $24,000, after 6 months of saying yes, after a lifetime of packing his lunches, of driving him to hockey practice at 5 in the morning in January, of sitting up with him when he had croup, of co-signing his first apartment lease, of lending him and Vanessa the down payment for their house, a loan they had. I realized with a small, dull shock, never fully paid back. I didn't reply that night. I went upstairs and I lay in the dark, next to the empty side of the bed where Gerald used to sleep. And I stared at the ceiling and I asked him, out loud, in a voice I barely recognized, "When did I become a guest in the family you and I built? When did I become the check and not the mother?" He didn't answer, of course, but I think somewhere in the dark I answered for him. The next morning, I got up at 6, the way I always do, and I made oatmeal. And I ate it standing at the sink, looking out at the maple tree. And I made a decision. Not a dramatic decision. Not the kind of decision you'd put in a movie. A quiet one. The kind Gerald would have made. I opened my laptop, I logged into my RBC account, and I navigated to the travel account, the joint access one, where Daniel could make bookings on my behalf, and I found the option I had never used before. Freeze all linked transactions. Pause all pending and future bookings. Are you sure? A little dialog box, white on blue. A cursor blinking patiently the way only a computer can be patient. I sat there with my finger hovering over the trackpad for what must have been 3 full minutes. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry, not in the hot way you see on television. I was something quieter than angry. I was finished. I clicked yes. Then I called the cottage rental company, a lovely woman in Surrey named Bernadette, and I explained that there had been a change in circumstances and that I would like to transfer the booking to my own name only, and that I would be bringing 3 guests instead of the original party. She was kind about it. She said these things happen. I didn't cry until after I'd hung up. Then I called my sister Eleanor in Halifax. My sister is 2 years younger than me, widowed herself, sharper than a tack. and she has loved me through every hard thing I have ever lived through. I told her everything. I told her about the tickets, about the text, about the bathroom, about the blinking cursor, and Eleanor listened the way she always listens, without interrupting, without jumping in, and when I was done, she said, very simply, "Marg, come and get me. I'll be at the airport in Halifax. We'll drive over the bridge together." And then I called my best friend Judith, who taught across the hall from me for 26 years at Trudell Public School, and she said, "Count me in, Margaret. I've been wanting to see PEI since I was 15 years old." And I called Ruth, the woman from my book club, whose husband had died the same year Gerald did, and she said yes before I'd even finished asking. 4 women, 4 widows, 1 cottage, 10 days. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't block him. I didn't confront him, not yet. I simply stopped responding. He texted twice on July 4th asking if I was okay. He called once on July 5th. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail said, "Mom, I'm getting a weird error on the travel account. Can you call me back?" I did not call him back. He called again on July 9th, 3 days before the trip. His voice on the voicemail was different this time. Tighter. "Mom, I really need you to call me. The cottage rental says the booking's been modified. Vanessa's losing her mind. Please call." I deleted the voicemail. I packed my suitcase. I packed Gerald's old road map of the Maritimes, the one with his thumbprint on the Souris coastline. On the morning of July 11th, Daniel showed up at my front door. He hadn't driven the 3 hours from Mississauga to see me in person in almost 4 months. He was sweating through his shirt. Vanessa was in the car at the curb, not getting out, her arms crossed. I opened the door and I said, "Daniel," just that, his name. The name I had chosen for him in a hospital room 40 years ago. The name I had whispered into the dark every time I was afraid he might not grow up to be a good man. He said, "Mom, what did you do?" And I looked at him for a long moment, and I realized that he was not asking what I had done to him. He was asking what I had done to the trip, to the logistics, to the cottage. He was asking about his inconvenience, not about our relationship. I said, "I believe I've done what you asked me to, sweetheart. You told me I wouldn't be joining you, so I'm not. I've rearranged things accordingly. The cottage is in my name. The rental car is in my name. The flights I booked for your family have been refunded to the original payment method, which is my credit card. Your wife's sister's tickets have also been canceled and refunded. The restaurants are canceled. I hope you have a lovely July. I imagine you'll need to rebook everything yourselves, but I'm confident you'll manage. You've both got careers in management, haven't you?" He stared at me. His mouth actually opened and closed twice, like a fish. He said, "Mom, you can't. We already told everyone. Vanessa's parents already flew in from Victoria." I said, "I'm sure you'll figure it out, Daniel. You're very capable. You told me it wasn't personal. I'm trying very hard to take that at face value." He said, "Mom, please. Please. I'm sorry. I'll talk to Vanessa. We can include you. Of course we can include you. It was just..." And here is the part I will remember until the day I joined Gerald, because from behind him, from the car at the curb, Vanessa's voice came sharp and carrying across the lawn. "Daniel, are you fixing it or not? Not, is your mother okay? Not, can we talk about this? Are you fixing it?" As though I were a broken appliance, and the mother of her children was an inconvenience on a Thursday morning. I looked past my son at her. I held her eyes through the car window for what felt like a long time. And then I looked back at Daniel, and I said, very gently, because I have never been anything but gentle with him, "Sweetheart, I love you. I have loved you every single day of your life, and I will love you every single day I have left." But I am not going to be convenient anymore. I am going to Prince Edward Island the day after tomorrow. I am going with my sister and my two dearest friends. I am going to watch the sun come up on red sand, and I am going to scatter a small portion of your father's ashes on a beach his grandmother used to walk on, and I am going to do it without you, because you have made it clear that is what you prefer. Please close the door on your way out. It sticks in the summer. He didn't say anything. He just stood there on the porch, and his shoulders dropped. And I hope that was the moment something in him finally understood. I closed the door myself, gently. I didn't slam it. I have never been a door slammer. I watched through the window as he walked back to the car. I watched Vanessa's mouth moving. I watched the car pull away. And then I sat down at the kitchen table, and I put my hands flat on the wood that Gerald had refinished the summer before he died, and I let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes. Then I got up, and I called the airline to confirm the ferry portion of my new itinerary, and I made myself a sandwich, and I got on with my life. 2 days later, I was on a plane to Halifax. Eleanor met me at the airport with a thermos of tea, because that is who my sister is. We picked up Judith and Ruth in Moncton. They'd driven up separately, and we rented a minivan and drove over the Confederation Bridge in the late afternoon, the four of us in our 60s and 70s, singing along to Stan Rogers on the radio because Judith insisted, and I remember looking out the window as the red cliffs of PEI came into view and thinking, Gerald, we made it. I brought us here. The cottage was everything the photos had promised, and more. A weathered gray shingle house on a bluff above the water, with a fire pit in the yard and a long wooden porch facing east. That first evening we lit a fire and ate fresh mussels Eleanor had bought from a roadside stand, and we drank tea, and we laughed so hard Judith actually snorted. I had forgotten what that sound was. I had forgotten what it felt like to be around people who didn't want anything from me except my company. On the second morning, I walked alone to the shoreline just after 5 a.m. The sun was coming up over the gulf, turning the water pink and gold, and the sand was as red as Gerald had always said it would be. I took the small tin from my coat pocket, a fraction of his ashes, just a small fraction. The rest is buried under the maple tree at home, and I let the wind take him where he'd always wanted to go. I said out loud, to him and to no one, I brought you home, my love. I'm sorry it took me so long. I stayed on that beach until the sun was fully up. A heron waded past me in the shallows. Somewhere behind me, the kettle whistled in the cottage, and I heard Eleanor calling my name, asking if I wanted oatmeal. I want to tell you that Daniel called me on the 4th day, and he did. He called me crying. A grown man, 40 years old, sobbing on the phone from his wife's parents' house in Victoria, where the whole PEI plan had collapsed into a tense week at his in-laws. He said he was sorry. He said Vanessa had behaved badly. He said he had behaved worse. He said he'd been a coward, and that he hadn't stood up for me when he should have, and that the moment he hit send on that text, he had known it was wrong. But he'd told himself, I'd understand, because I always understood, because that was the deal we had. I understood, and he got to be comfortable. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he was done, I said, Daniel, I love you. I will always love you. But love and access are not the same thing. You are going to have to earn your way back to access. I'm not angry. I'm not punishing you. I'm simply no longer available to be used. Do you understand the difference? He said he did. I hope he does. Time will tell. I stayed on PEI for the full 10 days. We walked the beaches. We ate lobster rolls in Victoria by the sea. We drove the coastal road up to North Cape and watched the wind turbines turn against the sky. On the last evening, the four of us sat on the porch with mugs of tea, not jars. Eleanor teased me for bringing my blue mug from home, but I like my blue mug, and we watched the sun go down, and Judith said, quietly, "Margaret, I haven't seen you look this much like yourself in 6 years." And Ruth said, "She's not the same woman who got on the plane, Jude. That woman is buried in the sand somewhere." And we all laughed, but it was true, and we all knew it was true. I came home to a quiet house and a mailbox full of bills and a voicemail from my daughter-in-law. I have not yet listened to the voicemail. I'm not sure that I will. The maple tree outside is bare now. November has come, and the snow has started, and I am sitting once again at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in Poppy's blue mug. Daniel calls every Sunday now. Sometimes he brings Poppy over for the afternoon, just her, because she asked. We bake together. She tells me about school. I tell her about her grandfather, and about the red sand, and about how one day, when she's older, I'll take her out there myself. I turned 71 last month. I am still a retired schoolteacher, still a widow, still a grandmother of 3. But I am no longer a bank account with a woman attached to it. I am no longer the yes that everyone relied on. I am a woman who booked a trip, and when her family tried to take the trip without her, she took it anyway with her sister and her friends and her husband's memory, and came home changed. My money, it turns out, was never the problem. My silence was. And I have finally, at 71, decided that I am done being silent. The cattail is whistling. The snow is coming down over the maple. And for the first time in a very long time, I am exactly where I want to be.